making it here today. I'm really glad to be hosting this panel. My name is Martin Halley. I work for UNEP's Climate Finance Unit, and our remit is really to increase and accelerate investment into the nature space. And as part of that, we, perhaps most relevant to this morning's panel, we operate together with the Frankfurt School the Restoration Seed Capital Facility, and that was set up specifically to address the issue of bottlenecks in forest and carbon project development. Taking a very specific approach, the facility aims particularly to help fund managers that are operating investment vehicles, funds and the like in the space of impact investment for nature. And we help to overcome two specific bottlenecks in this sector. One that we've identified is the issue of raising the funds in the first place. So for fund managers who want to raise a vehicle in this space, it's still extremely difficult. We've heard yesterday throughout the day the issues facing managers in getting the investment in. So that's one of the aspects that we support, is in helping the fund managers actually get the capital in and get their fund up and running. But that's only one aspect of the bottlenecks that we identified and tried to address. The other one is more relevant to today's discussion, is really, even once they have the funds, the issue of deploying them is also presents its own challenges. Typically, there are few investment-ready opportunities out there, and fund managers have to do a lot of work in identifying early-stage opportunities and bringing them to the point where they become an investable proposition. And that's where the second pillar of support from the facility comes in. But again, that's only one solution, and it only targets one very specific stakeholder in this space. And we've heard throughout the day yesterday the number of difficulties, the multifaceted difficulties that are still holding back deployment of capital in this space. And one thing that really struck me is the number of times this issue of the mismatch came up. The mismatch between what is, at least on the face of it, an available pool of capital looking for opportunities in this space, and on the other side, a set of solutions, of project developers, of investment opportunities out there that are not quite meeting that pool of capital, and the difficulty in matching those two. And from my own perspective, I think a big part of that comes from the fact that even though some of us have been looking at this space for a long time, the market is still in its infancy. Nature investments are still quite new, quite poorly understood. And I think that newness and that lack of familiarity, particularly from the side of the investors, translates often into a risk perception, a high risk perception and a reluctance to get involved. And that's really going to be the focus of the discussion today, is what kind of solutions can we find to overcome some of that risk perception, some of that lack of familiarity, and overcome the bottlenecks to really let the investment flow into this space. So I'm delighted to be joined by a great panel today with a great variety of perspectives on this space, from bringing better data and modeling to increase transparency and reduce risk, or de-risking projects through genuine community engagement, but also the asset manager perspective on how to accelerate investment in this sector. So we'll kick things off by asking each panelist in turn to briefly present themselves and their perspective on this, but also give us, from their perspective, what is one key bottleneck that they see still slowing down the deployment of capital in this sector to the solutions on the ground that are really achieving impact. And once we've had that first round focusing on the bottlenecks, the discussion will focus more then on what solutions exist out there to try and overcome those. So we'll start at the far end with Anna, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Anna Lehmann is my name. I'm leading the People's Forests Partnership, which is an organization that brings together indigenous and local communities and companies to develop investment partnerships, lasting investment partnerships. And so, apologies, my brain is a little slow. I was expecting to be the second one. I came on an early train from Brighton today, so let me get into the swing here. But from our perspective, from what we hear with communities on the ground is, and I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new here, land everywhere is becoming scarcer, and the crisis is picking up. We're confronted by a system of polycrises, and they're not going to go away. So any land-based investment builds on a history, in many cases a very violent history or a very complex history. And really understanding where we come from is absolutely critical to knowing where we go to and where we can go to, and how we can create trusted partnerships with the stakeholders on the ground, actually understanding who they are and what their interests are. And, coming from that development perspective from the outset is critical for the sustainability of the investment on the long run, is what I would say. I can dive a little bit deeper into it later on. Myself, I'm a trained biodynamic farmer, agriculture economist. I've worked on structuring rural development programs for public developers, public financiers, mostly reforestation programs in Asia, and have been in the carbon market for the last 20 years trying to create those green jobs that we need to create to restore nature and to keep nature and biodiversity standing where we have it, together with the stewards of these lands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ariane?
Hello, everyone. So on my side, I'm Ariane Kaploun. I'm working for AXA Climate, which is an entity from the AXA Group, the insurance company. Maybe a few words on AXA Climate. So we were created 5 years ago, and the initial focus was parametric insurance. That was brilliantly explained yesterday by the forestry team. And to do parametric insurance, we need two core expertise. We need science, so climatologist, hydrologist, agronomist. And we need data science, because we do use data to trigger insurance against drought, flooding, any type of climate disaster. And soon enough, we realized that insurance is interesting as a risk transfer mechanism, but if we want to help our clients reduce their vulnerability, we should rather use this modeling expertise, helping them understanding how climate and biodiversity risk will impact them in 2030, 2050. So this is why today we have 3 activities. So we are still doing climate insurance products, but we are also doing consulting with this modeling capabilities and training. Regarding natural capital, big topic, that's why we're all here today. We became interested first as an adaptation solution into nature-based solution or ecosystem-based solution, because we realized that if we want to help our clients develop their adaptation strategies, we have to promote sustainable adaptation measures. And soon enough, a nature-based solution was the one we wanted to promote. So I joined the team 3 years ago now to help adapt our expertise on climate and biodiversity modeling to the needs of developers and investors into nature-based solution, I would say. Regarding the bottleneck question, so as you said, again, as an intro, Martin, when we discussed a lot yesterday about the financial difficulties, a lot of risks, perceived or real. And I think one of the challenge is that the way we are evaluating those projects is too traditional, in a way that one of the key expected indicator is still financial return. Meanwhile, we want this project to have positive impact on climate, on society, on biodiversity. So I feel there is this mismatch between financial focus in a way and in the way we value the positive outcomes that we want for planet Earth out of this project. So I would say that maybe we should change the lens a little bit and start evaluating those also positive outcomes on biodiversity and the people, rather than just financial return. Yeah, stop there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Adam?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. I'm Adam Gibbon. I'm the Natural Capital Lead at AXA IM, so we're an asset manager. I manage our $500 million natural capital fund. With that fund, we invest in afforestation, conservation projects focused on peatlands and forests, and then also in the provision of household devices. And the common theme running through our investments is that those businesses generate returns from payment for environmental services for the majority of their revenues. Typically today, that's mainly carbon credits. I personally have been an investor in this space for 10 years now. Prior to that, I started my career as a research scientist, so as a landscape ecologist, and I was a developer developing projects on the ground, and I was an auditor as well. So in terms of bottlenecks, I've been able to see those bottlenecks and maybe being that bottleneck up and down the value chain over the last years. So two bottlenecks that jump out to me, and ones we're trying to solve with the way we've structured our fund. And the first is the lack of well-capitalized project developers. So there is a lot of very hard multidisciplinary work that takes time that needs to be done to bring the sort of projects that we want to market. They need patient capital, they need equity. With our fund, we've taken equity stakes now in 4 developers, and we're starting to see the results now as projects over time come to us. And the second one then is the provision of large-scale and flexible financing. There's no one type of project in this space. So we need financial institutions with flexible financing that can meet the needs of the developer. And that's something we've tried to do when structuring our fund. We're fortunate to be able to write ticket sizes of tens of millions of dollars for project financing and use a variety of instruments. So we can use debt, we can use equity, as I mentioned, mezzanine financing in the middle. And even with carbon, we can do more off-take-like contracts as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Enda.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, Enda Keane is my name. I'm a forester. I'm 31 years working as a forester around the world. 19 years with a company that I founded called Treemetrics, working mainly for state forestry companies, state forest research authorities around the world, and large and small private forest owners. And in the last few years, we got stuck in doing projects, helping project developers that you were mentioning there, Adam. And yeah, I'm to use Peter's term yesterday, I've been stuck in the forest for a lot of those years, and I'm baffled as to the lack of money that's in this sector. It just baffles me. And the older I get, the more cranky I get, and the more angry I get. And I'm asking the question, where the hell is the money? And why isn't it here with an unbelievable asset class that gives so much value? It just baffles me. And I promise myself in the coming years, I'm going to do my best to develop projects, promote the sector, and just get more money. That's my mission. Thank you.
That's great. And I couldn't agree more. I think it's really, we've heard yesterday about the difficulties in the sector and their high risk perception. But I think it was said by Murray yesterday. The real risk is not investing in these solutions. Yeah. There's a sense of urgency that's clearly lacking, I think, at the level of investment in general. But coming back to that and coming back to these issues of how we start to address these issues, I'd maybe start with Ariane. It's really interesting to hear from you that you in the journey of AXA Climate, you started out just offering a product out there, but you realized that offering the product isn't really enough or the most impactful you can do. There's a real need to bring more than that, to bring insight, to bring knowledge, and to share that and share the information, to really bridge the gap between where the reality on the ground and the perception out there. So, can you say more about how you see that insight, new information, new modeling, and how that can contribute to unlocking the capital for these projects?
Yeah. So maybe just stepping back a little bit about risk, because when we say, there are many risks, it's like feels a bit like a black box, no? Like risk, we don't know, it's scary, blah, blah, blah. So maybe just we can decompose in a simplistic way risk in different categories, right? Probably there are internal risk, management default risk, and it's asset manager mission to evaluate this. External risk that are very hard to mitigate, war, political issues, pandemic, probably, and natural hazards. climate disasters. And here, actually, we have the science, we have the models to evaluate very precisely how climate change or climate indicators will potentially endanger the project in a near or mid-term future. 2030, 2050 is a comfortable horizon to assess that. And also how the project can, on the opposite side, create positive outcome and reduce risk and vulnerability on the climate aspect. And what is true for climate is also true for biodiversity today. So there is this also link between risk and risk dependencies and positive outcome that a nature-based project can generate in both sides. And I think in most of the, often this climate dimension is risk part, or is climate risk dimension, is a bit forgotten, even though we have all heard of fantastic mangrove conservation programs that have been just erased because of a cyclone, or great reforestation projects that have just become erased also by a wildfire. So those projects are long-term. If they are not, there is a problem, right? So we are investing into natural capital for 30 years, 50 years, hopefully 100 years or more. And in this long period, we will see climate change. We will see an increased pressure on, with wildfire, with storm, potentially with other type of climate pressure. So, so solutions. Let's get rid, of this climate and biodiversity risk, because we do have very good scientific expertise and knowledge to model this, to assess the vulnerability of species in a reforestation program, to assess the practices, forest management practices that actually reduce this vulnerability. So let's use that. And if there is a residual risk that is, too big to be taken at the own developer or investor's cost, yes, let's push that to the insurance and take insurance to transfer these remaining parts.
Fantastic, thank you. And maybe just coming to you, bouncing off that, I think we've heard also throughout the day yesterday the leaps and bounds that the sort of nature tech sector is coming in, that there's a wealth of information and a quality of information now on nature that's really increased. And do you think in conjunction with these models and these risk solutions, this new data and these new solutions can contribute to alleviating these bottlenecks?
Yeah, before I answer that, and maybe to add to Arian's point about climate change, I have been lucky to travel the world over the last 31 years, and the one thing that I have seen, it started about 15 years ago when I was in Finland, when I spoke to Finnish foresters, and they're telling me about the fact that they're suddenly seeing that they can't bring their machines into the forest at winter time because they're not getting the permafrosts that they used to get. And they said, that's climate change. And it started from there, and on my journey around the world, in many parts of the world, I've kept hearing these stories. Like in Spain, for example, the foresters on the southern side of the Pyrenees telling me that the summers are getting longer, the winters are getting shorter, the trees are getting stressed. And you come up through the continent, you look at all over the world, one problem we've made is that we have not talked about it. We hear about the big fires and the big events, but there are lots of these small events that we don't talk about, but foresters on the ground are worried. And they haven't talked enough about it. Like only a few weeks ago, I was with the state forests in France, and they shocked me by telling me they have 400,000 hectares of dead and dying trees, of native trees, trees that we were told are resilient and we're going to live for thousands of years or hundreds of years, are dying. And they're now resorting to taking species from Turkey and Arizona. They're testing these species to see can they be more drought resilient. So yeah, it's another example of scary stuff that we're not talking enough about. We have huge opportunities, but we've also huge challenges. And data, definitely, look, I'm a data person, so I'm not going to give you the hard sell, but we all know data, it's getting cheaper, thanks be to God. Satellites, Elon Musk launching lots of little small satellites, and data is suddenly getting cheaper. Satellite imagery, you can buy it now for 3 cents a hectare. 2 years ago, I was paying 3,000 $4,000 for 100,000 square kilometers, even if I only needed 1,000 hectares. The data is plummeting in price, and processing it is getting easier. And I hate the word AI, by the way. It's terrible hype, but it's making life easier, but it's not giving a better answer. It's just automating the process. You still need the people on the ground, boots on the ground, getting lots and lots of data. That'll never change. So another little rant. Sorry.
Fantastic, thanks. Maybe coming back to Adam then, from the asset manager perspective, how do you see these kind of solutions in terms of both providing better insight, reducing some of the uncertainty? Does that help from the asset manager point of view in bringing you confidence on some of the projects you're looking at?
Yes, certainly. And give a nice little anecdote from some work we've been doing with AXA Climate. So we're investigating a tree planting project at the moment, afforestation, and we commissioned a study into the climate risk, how these species are going to perform in future climate scenarios. To be honest, it's a little terrifying when you have to take those graphs and apply them to something you're actually working on, looking out 50 years, but we have to have that generational view with forestry. And the particular sites we were looking at, it was worrying, but it's like, okay, well, we've got the data now. I think if we do the right species selection and manage things properly, there's still a good opportunity here. What we saw at the same time was that in other parts of the country, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm glad we're not in the north, because we're going to have significant supply drops in terms of output from those areas. So this is an example where, whilst there is risk, that's an opportunity for putting the right trees in the right place today. And we're all trying to make this risk return equation work. It's easy just to say reduce risks and increase returns, but I think we're going to look for concrete opportunities like this, where I can see based on that the supply of the wood in these countries is going to reduce from the existing stock. So we've got an opportunity, if we can get good supply from a new area, that's going to be more robust in the face of climate change. So I think this sort of data is really useful for planning out into the future.
Fantastic, thanks. Anna, maybe coming to you and going from space back to the ground. From a very different perspective, you were mentioning the importance of the community engagement, particularly with indigenous peoples and local communities. How do you see that really helping? Because on the face of it, you could think, well, that extensive process of consultation and that generation of consensus on the ground is yet another thing that might slow down the projects. But how do you see that as really being a part of the solution?
Good question, thank you. Let me start just with a comment around what we're seeing currently, and I'm speaking for the carbon market here, but I'm sure forestry investments also go very much. They go through phases of being loved or not so much loved by public and by public media, depending on how they look visually in the landscape. People have a very strong connection to land everywhere. I mean, many people have, and some of us might have forgotten it, but when it comes to land in our backyards and in our neighborhoods, all by a sudden we feel very icky when something is happening, and especially in the UK with developers, spreading with such speed right now, going into greenfield sites, that is making communities very upset. Even here, it's very important. The community issues that we hear from, they're actually shared. Indigenous people have the amazing capacity to still organize themselves as communities. They have a shared identity, they have a shared village hall, they come together, they find ways to find solutions. I'm asking everybody in this room, think about, there would be an investment into nature in your neighborhood, wherever you live, in East London, in Richmond, Cambridge, wherever that might be. And try to get your neighbors together to agree on how to spend £1 million. Just go through that. The amount of trust building you've got. I love the laugh. Yeah, I live in Brighton. It's not easy. But that is, that's a skill that we have lost, but some of us humans on this planet still have. And that's actually fascinating. It's fascinating to work with. It's a huge resource for us to learn from. If we use and work with those processes, respecting them as they are, but also, all these traditions and cultures, they're fluid. They're fluid systems. Nothing is ever set in stone. And they're not always inclusive. It's a very gendered conversation, making sure to bring in really experts that can find anthropologists and economists that really can find the right targets groups to work with, and making sure women are integrated, the youth are integrated, and and bringing into innovation even into those decision-making processes is absolutely critical. But just coming back to what we're seeing in the carbon space right now, even the best developers, or the ones that we felt are the best, they have overachieved on the social safeguard side beyond any of the standards out there. Over 10 years, over a decade, even those get attacked by media. We've seen really horrific media attacks just recently, and I don't think they're going to stop, because people are getting nervous. And humans around the world are nervous, and that's just a perception that they have huge impact. I feel like the fact that we have the Integrity Council for the voluntary carbon market is to a large degree because of the negative press that we've been seeing in the carbon world. The standards are going into them, they're biting themselves in the tail, trying to be more accurate and more robust. We're focusing immensely on just, almost from a, almost like an obsession, I feel, in the carbon world, trying to get the carbon accounting right. This is where 80% of the development costs go. Adam, correct me, but if not more, right?
Probably fair.
Like it's a huge amount, and because of that obsession, to focus on the correct carbon accounting, because only then we can have a tradable asset. The rest actually gets forgotten. The community, the social side, the biodiversity side really gets forgotten. It's not being built into the development process early enough, not with good enough quality, good enough staff, and the right allocation of upfront investment. So getting that right, getting those balances right is really important. And also having the right teams on the ground that are actually ready to do the job. It's complex work, but it can be done. And we have a lot of tools. We have an enormous amount of tools from the development world. I feel the carbon market really lacked. From the beginning, I was coming from the development space and then moving into private sector and project development of carbon projects. I was actually blown away how little we would draw on existing tools for social baseline setting, for participatory planning processes that weren't just picked up in the space yet. So there's a huge untapped opportunity here. And, another thing, just to sort of really get that message across, I think communities, they don't always need to own the land. In some countries, they're lucky and own the land. But even here in the UK, communities own very, very little, if anything. But they see themselves as stewards. And giving them a role in the design process early onwards, making them part of creating a sense of ownership, asking them for their own investment in terms of time, in terms of creative design of activities, is absolutely critical, again, for the long-term longevity of the investment in the long term. I think I'll leave it here for now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Adam, I think this really comes back to the right selection of project managers who have those kind of good practices, but it also shows the importance of that pre-work, in a sense, of that work that goes in ahead of an actual investment, and that's onerous and complex and needs the right skills to be put in place. And there's that gap at the level of project managers ahead of the investment time, and that's, I think, something you've tried to address in the way AXA IM approaches its investments. And is that something you'd like to share a bit more in terms of how you approach that with developers?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I mean, we ask a lot of our project developers. They have to manage all these risks on the ground, they have to find patient investors who are willing to invest tens of millions of dollars for these landscape projects in a relatively new asset class. So we're asking an awful lot of them, and I think that's why these groups, these companies, need to be well capitalized. They need to be able to bring together multiple disciplinary teams. They need to be able to have capacity to work on things like the social aspects, the risks, the technical side of the forestry and the land use, and they need expertise in law and finance. So I think these groups really need to be capitalized like that. And I think the thing that would help us as an investor to move faster is if, as these projects are being put together, they have sort of a risk-based approach. They're looking at risk the same way investors do. So analyze the risks, bring them to the surface, and then present a risk-mitigated plan to investors, rather than more of a sales pitch. And then we have to spend our time digging into the risks and getting more and more sort of disappointed as you uncover risks that have not been issued. Let's get them all at the front. And I think when I've seen the most successful projects out there in terms of fundraising, it's those that they've done that, and they've made it really easy for investors to say yes. And then when you get one of those on your desk, this is human nature, but then you start to get the FOMO, like the fear of missing out, like this one's good. And they do jump off the page. So I think that's what will get money moving faster, but it does require a bit of extra work up front. And as I said, equity capital is one thing we can do, but there are other, softer forms of capital that can help with that as well. But to anyone who's providing that soft capital, I'd say think about the handover. What's your aim at the end of this process? Who are you what's the next round of financing? And spend most of your time with them, figuring out what they need so that we can get the projects moving fast.
Fantastic. That's really, really good. I think that you point to a very important issue here, which is the issue of transparency. Mm-hmm. And to build that trust, really, as you say, if you're feeling like you're going to have to do the investigation to uncover the weaknesses in the pitch, it's a lot less compelling than if things are transparent and put on the page, and say we're aware of these risks and these weaknesses, but here's how we propose to address them. And that's maybe where it comes back to Ariane and Enda in terms of providing the tools, really, is it through modeling, through data, to really articulate those risks much better and offer solutions to mitigate them. So I don't know if either of you want to react to that in terms of what's emerging out there and how that really helps to bring the transparency that's needed.
Do you want to say something? Yeah. Well, I'm here as a guest of Ariane's, actually, because today, a few days ago, we signed an agreement with AXA Climate Trimetrics, and themselves were producing a insurance product for the forest owners internationally. It's just something that we were listening to our clients, and they were saying, we just want more options. And we met with AXA a few months ago, and we've put together a product that's at the core of it is just good measurement. So knowing your value of your forest and obviously knowing your risks and your history and stuff like that, but at the core of it, measuring and knowing the value of your asset as best possible, which is what we've been doing for the last 19 years. I don't know, do you want to add anything else, Ariane?
Yeah, thank you. And so maybe going back here to the insurance needs and question, one of the products that we want to promote and to propose to the market is actually insurance products that will help sustainable forestry projects. And by helping, I mean having competitive pricing that will encourage this sustainable project developer to get insurance. And so we have to differentiate the insurance product between traditional commercial forest and great reforestation project with social and biodiversity outcomes. And so here we come very quickly to some underwriting concerns, how these insurance products are built. And we did obviously a lot of data to do that. So if you looked at climate risk, there is three main components. There is hazard, how frequent the event is occurring. There is exposure. Taking the example of storm, are you just in the way of the storm, or are you 15 kilometers away? And there is vulnerability. How will your asset react to the storm? And with exposure and hazards, we have already a lot of data from satellite imagery that we can use. We have 20 years often of historical data that are useful for modeling. But regarding vulnerability and tree, because this is the topic, tree vulnerability, we absolutely need data from foresters, from Ender, for instance, to incorporate this. Because behind the vulnerability, there is also the question of tree species, right? How the forest is planted, what is the tree height, what is the tree diameters, what is the spacing between the trees. And all this data actually have an impact on the forest resilience to storms, going back to this example. And so this is how we can partner and build a insurance product that will integrate those parameters and then differentiate between a monoculture of traditional forest and diversified forests with sustainable practices. So yeah, we're very glad to have this new agreement.
Fantastic, and congratulations on the new partnership. I have an endless list of questions I'd like to ask you guys, but I want to give the opportunity as well to the room just to see if there are any questions for the panelists. We can have, I see a few. There's one there at the back, or maybe starting here.
Great panel so far. Thank you so much. Khalil Baker, Taking Root. I'm a project developer. Yesterday we talked a lot about the mismatch in just the way people on the investment side talk about these things and how people talk about these on the project development side. And Adam, you mentioned when you see a proposal that is really well structured and really speaks to the risk, it kind of jumps off the desk. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit of, just because like in the project development space, there is frameworks for how you evaluate risks kind of thing. And I'm curious if it's the same frameworks that is being looked at from an investment perspective, and if it's whether that's different, and any resources you could recommend for how to think about it from the investor perspective.
Thanks a lot. I think we'll take the two other questions. I think Sean here and somebody at the back there, and then give the panel a chance to react. I was it here? Sorry.
Well, it wasn't me. I've got the microphone. Very interested in the comment about competitive pricing. One of my thoughts is that the investment arms of insurers should have some link with underwriters. And of course, they're two very different ecosystems. One is obviously trying for the best returns, and the other is under a duty to get the best returns in the underwriting. I was told by, it wasn't AXA obviously, somebody else that would never happen. They would never join together so that underwriters could say, that's good for the planet, therefore the competitive, the useful price is whatever, 20% lower or 10% lower or something.
At the back there.
Hey everyone, Gilad Gorin from the Nature Tech Collective. First of all, thank you for using the term Nature Tech. It's great to hear it when it's not just me saying it. I guess the question that I have is, with regards to the social benefits, we have called a vision where we are able to enable the frontline communities, the indigenous populations to actually become nature's engineers and actually be the ones that are collecting nature data, maintaining nature, like camera traps and all that kind of stuff, and you build in social equity into that space. I know that there are concerns about the costs related to nature tech, and so I'm actually wondering from the investor side and from the developer side, have you taken this aspect into account? And then in a way, almost like two birds with one stone, right? You're gonna have to do it anyways, and you wanna talk about social benefits, and they're basically tied in together. And if so, if you have any use cases or past experience with that concept.
Excellent. Thank you all for the questions. I'll let you react. I don't know, Anna, if you want to come in on the last point, or any of you want to react to any of the points.
I felt that it was more of a question for Adam, actually. I'm happy to come in, but I think it was from...
Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't quite understand the social to nature tech link to answer that question. Apologies.
I think the idea is to involve the local communities in the data collection, and so build that link really to the local communities, involving them in that.
That's something that we've been doing actually. The latest iPhone has this little LiDAR sensor, and we've been getting non-technical people to go out there and just point the sensor at the tree and it'll name the tree, species, diameter, measure the height of the trees, the stocking, the spread of the trees between each other, and all that data goes straight up into the cloud. And it's just another example of, but just going back to the whole, my life in forestry, you know, somebody has to do the work on the ground, putting the trees in the ground, preparing the ground, maintaining them, managing them, and please God, getting an income from the actual timber. If, you know, so there's huge rural economic activity is just unbelievable from forestry when it's done right. And again, another reason why we should be shouting more for more forestry and more nature projects, because nature has a huge role to play within that forest as well.
Maybe I can pick up the question from the floor again, the way I understood it. You come in and correct me, but there's enormous ways like how we can work with people on the ground, and of course, you know, creating those jobs and empowering them to take that type of ownership is really important. How we do it, what technology we work with, how we work with indigenous knowledge and indigenous science, all very critical. I'm curious though, because one thing we all struggle with in this world is to, you know, carbon is easy. It's not that easy, but it's really easy to monitor compared to biodiversity or social impacts, right? Trees don't walk as much, and
They do.
trees walking trees. But how do we then, you know, it often stops actually at the beginning of the project development process where we don't even have a social baseline. We don't really know where to start from. We just like randomly there, oh, this guy looks like he needs a job, so here you go, you know. And then it's really hard to measure that over time. And I think something that we're trying to do with projects that are that our members represent and work with is to integrate social impact indicators as you move along already, you know. So that's a science in itself, gets very complex. But I'm curious from you, Adam, you know, what's your perception here? You know, do you see the indicators out there yet for you that you feel like you can start measuring that a project is on a good way? Considering we all have to improve over time, nothing is ever perfect.
Yeah, I think that is a challenge, as you say, that the carbon stays more still and it's easier to track. We do have for our projects, we have both an ESG framework where we're looking at the risks, and to try and answer the other gentleman's question at the same time, that framework is built on IFC performance standards, which I think comes to your point, Anna, of using tools that already exist and people have familiarity with. So that in terms of social risk assessment, that's one that we use. And this exact example, if you've done work in that dimension already, to show how you're lining up against IFC performance standards on the relevant dimensions, then that makes our work much quicker. But we also look at the positive side as well. So we have 12 KPIs that encompass both as you'd expect, the climate and biodiversity side, but also on the social side. But you're right, work has to go in on day one because we need to understand those social baselines. And we also need to be humble enough to be dynamic as the project evolves as well. So one of our projects, Mombac, this is a company in the Brazilian Amazon. They bio-lease degraded cattle pasture and plant over 100 native species. They had a social program, you know, on paper when they started the project that was, you know, written by people, well-meaning and very qualified people. But once they got on the ground and they started to implement it, they realized actually other things are important to the surrounding communities. We hadn't realized at the time that communities want access to the land to get access to this specific fruit. So perhaps that's something we could not only just like allow, but facilitate and make even better for them. Same with fishing access. You know, people used to sneak in and do the fishing sort of illegally on the old cattle pasture, but was this something we could actually turn into a positive? Can we facilitate the access to people, control it, but facilitate it? And once people start to realize, I'm making my livelihoods from this forest, or this grown forest, this reduces the risk now on the forest because those same individuals are less likely to be starting fires in the surrounding areas or illegally poaching trees. So I think a lot of these things, yeah, there is some humility to be able to adapt as things go on.
Fantastic. I do believe we're running out of time, but that's really great. I'm really glad that it seems there's a sense of optimism from all of you in terms of finding the solutions to start addressing the bottlenecks that we all can see. I'd like to thank you all and invite the room to join me in thanking the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.